In the vast expanse of the galaxy, the Galactic Council stood as a symbol of absolute power. Comprised of several ancient empires, each had carved out their dominion through centuries of conquest, fear, and relentless oppression. These empires had grown accustomed to their dominance, believing themselves invincible and unchallenged. The galaxy's lesser species had long since learned to bow before them, surrendering their resources, their cultures, and sometimes their very existence to the whims of the Council. To the members of the Council, this was the natural order, a hierarchy where they reigned supreme, and all others existed to serve. Amidst this well-established order, a new name began to echo through the corridors of power: Earth. A small, unremarkable planet from a relatively obscure part of the galaxy, Earth had somehow managed to make its presence known. Initially, the empires paid little attention to the rising power of humanity. To them, Earth was just another fledgling species, naive and weak, destined to either fall in line or be crushed underfoot like so many others before them. However, Earth's rapid technological advancements and its growing influence among neighboring systems soon became too noticeable to ignore. Reports began to filter in. Earth was not only expanding but was doing so with a level of efficiency and determination that was unnerving. Unlike the countless other species that had tried and failed to challenge the Council's authority, Earth was different. There was a stubbornness, a resilience in these humans that the empires had not encountered in millennia. Intrigued, and perhaps slightly perturbed, the Galactic Council decided to summon representatives from Earth to attend a session of negotiations. The Council's decision was driven by a mixture of curiosity and arrogance. They wanted to see for themselves this species that had stirred the pot and to remind them of their place in the grand scheme of things. When Earth's representatives arrived, they were met with the grandeur of the Council's central chamber, a vast, imposing structure designed to instill awe and fear. The empires had perfected the art of intimidation, using every tool at their disposal to ensure that those who entered these halls knew they were in the presence of ultimate power. The representatives from Earth, however, were unfazed. They observed the display with quiet confidence, their expressions betraying none of the fear that the Council had expected to see. The negotiations began with the usual pomp and bluster. The Council members took turns delivering thinly veiled threats, cloaked in diplomatic language. They spoke of the benefits of cooperation, the wisdom of aligning with the Council, and the consequences of defiance. To them, this was a formality, a routine procedure where they would exert just enough pressure to ensure compliance without the need for overt aggression. But Earth's representatives did not respond as expected. They listened carefully, their faces impassive, as the Council members laid out their demands. When it came time for Earth to speak, the chamber fell silent, eager to hear the words of these newcomers. What the Council received, however, was not the usual acquiescence they were accustomed to. Instead, the lead representative from Earth spoke calmly, yet firmly, rejecting the Council's terms in their entirety. There was no hesitation, no attempt at compromise, just a simple, direct refusal. The response sent a ripple of shock through the chamber. The empires, so used to their every word being obeyed without question, were momentarily at a loss. How could this species, barely known to them, dare to defy the collective will of the most powerful entities in the galaxy? The silence that followed was heavy with disbelief. When the Council members finally regained their composure, they tried to mask their surprise with dismissive laughter. They patronized the Earth representatives, suggesting that they reconsider their stance while they still had the chance. To the Council, Earth's refusal was little more than an act of ignorance, a lack of understanding of what was at stake. Surely, they thought, the humans would come to their senses once they realized the true extent of the Council's power. But Earth's delegation did not waver. They repeated their refusal, this time making it clear that Earth would not be intimidated, nor would it be controlled. They spoke of humanity's values, their belief in freedom and self-determination, and their willingness to defend those ideals at any cost. The Council members, who had long dismissed such notions as the naive dreams of weaker species, were once again taken aback. There was something different about these humans, something that made the usual threats and coercion ineffective. The session ended with no agreement reached. The Earth representatives left the chamber with the same quiet confidence with which they had entered, leaving the council members to stew in their frustration. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council had encountered a species that did not cower before them, that did not immediately submit to their demands. As the Earth delegation departed, the council members convened in a private session. Their initial shock had given way to anger and indignation. Who were these humans to defy them? The council, in its arrogance, began to plot ways to bring Earth to heel. They saw this as a challenge to their authority that could not go unanswered. Perhaps Earth had misjudged its own strength, or perhaps they were simply unaware of the full might of the empires they had just defied. Whatever the case, the Council was confident that Earth would soon realize the error of its ways. They would use force if necessary. After all, that was how they had maintained control for so long. Earth, they believed, would be no different from the countless other species that had resisted and been crushed. In the wake of the Galactic Council's attempt to intimidate Earth, the leaders of humanity convened to discuss the path forward. It was clear that the empires were not to be reasoned with. Their arrogance and centuries-long reign had made them blind to any solution that didn't involve subjugation. Earth's leadership, however, saw an opportunity in this confrontation, a chance not only to defend themselves but to fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. They knew they couldn't face the empires alone, but they also recognized that they weren't the only ones who had suffered under the Council's rule. The plan was ambitious. Earth would reach out to the many species that had been oppressed, exploited, and marginalized by the empires for generations. These were civilizations that had long since lost hope of ever being free, their spirits crushed by the overwhelming might of the Council. Earth's leaders believed that if these species could be convinced to join forces, a powerful coalition could be formed, one that would have the strength to challenge the empires on equal footing. Diplomatic missions were dispatched to the far corners of the galaxy. These missions were met with skepticism and caution. The oppressed species had heard grand promises before, only to be betrayed or overrun by the empires once more. They viewed Earth's overtures with suspicion, unable to believe that any species would willingly stand against the Galactic Council without some hidden agenda. To them, Earth was an unknown quantity, brave, perhaps, but foolish in its defiance. Earth's representatives understood this hesitation. They didn't offer empty words or unrealistic guarantees. Instead, they spoke plainly about Earth's own struggle for survival, their refusal to bow to tyranny, and their vision of a galaxy where no species lived in fear. They presented their plans not as an imposition but as a partnership, one where every member of the coalition would have a voice and a stake in the future they would build together. Gradually, the skepticism began to erode. The oppressed species, weary from centuries of subjugation, started to see in Earth a kindred spirit, a species that had not yet been broken by the Council's iron fist. They were drawn to the clarity of Earth's purpose and the sincerity of its offer. This wasn't just another rebellion doomed to fail. It was a carefully calculated strategy with the potential to succeed. As more species began to express interest, the coalition started to take shape. The formation of the human-led coalition was a momentous occasion. It brought together a diverse array of species, each with its own strengths, cultures, and histories of resistance. What united them was a shared experience of oppression and a newfound hope for a different future. Earth took the lead, not out of a desire for dominance but because they were the catalysts that had brought everyone together. They worked tirelessly to ensure that every member of the coalition felt valued and heard, fostering a spirit of unity and mutual respect that would be crucial in the battles to come. With the coalition formed, the focus shifted to preparing for war. This was not to be a conflict of attrition, where the empires could simply outlast their opponents. The coalition knew they needed to strike swiftly and decisively, using their combined strengths to disrupt and dismantle the Council's hold on the galaxy. Military strategies were developed that played to the unique capabilities of each species. Earth's technological innovations were shared freely, leveling the playing field and allowing the coalition's forces to fight with a coordination and efficiency that the empires had never before encountered. Training was rigorous and relentless. The coalition soldiers, many of whom had never known freedom, were now fighting for something they truly believed in. Their resolve was unshakable, their motivation fueled by the promise of a future without the Council's tyranny. The empires had relied on fear and division to maintain their control, but the coalition was built on the power of unity. This was their greatest strength, the realization that together, they were far stronger than they had ever been alone. As the coalition's preparations neared completion, there was a growing sense of anticipation. The oppressed species, once scattered and isolated, now stood as a formidable force ready to strike back. They had been underestimated and overlooked for too long, but that was about to change. The empires would soon learn that Earth's defiance was not an isolated act of rebellion but the first step in a larger movement that would reshape the galaxy. The coalition's leaders, including Earth's most brilliant minds, knew that the coming conflict would be brutal and costly. But they also knew that this was their best and perhaps only chance to free the galaxy from the Council's grip. They had prepared as much as they could, and now the time had come to act. The coalition, now fully formed and prepared, knew that their first move had to be decisive. The empires had grown complacent, believing their power unassailable. But the coalition's leaders understood that to win this war, they couldn't afford a prolonged conflict. They needed to strike where it would hurt the most, crippling the empire's ability to wage war and shattering their confidence in a single, coordinated effort. The plan was as bold as it was precise. The coalition's intelligence teams, made up of the brightest minds from across its member species, had spent months gathering information on the Empire's most vital assets. These were the linchpins of the Empire's military might, shipyards that produced their fearsome fleets, energy hubs that powered entire star systems, communication relays that kept their vast territories in sync, and command centers where strategic decisions were made. These targets were heavily guarded, their locations known to few outside the highest ranks of the empires. But the coalition had infiltrated their defenses, identifying vulnerabilities that could be exploited in a series of lightning-fast strikes. The operation was set to unfold simultaneously across multiple systems, leaving the empires with no time to mount an effective defense. The coalition's fleets were divided into specialized task forces, each one assigned to a specific target. Earth's forces, leading the charge, were tasked with the most critical objectives. They would hit the primary shipyard of the most powerful empire first, aiming to destroy not only the infrastructure but also the fleets in dock, still under construction and vulnerable. As the moment of the first strike approached, the coalition forces moved into position. They navigated through the dark void of space with absolute silence, their ships cloaked and their communications encrypted. The Empire's sensors, designed to detect large-scale invasions, failed to pick up the small, agile strike teams slipping through their defenses. When the coalition forces reached their targets, they were already primed for destruction. The first strike was executed with breathtaking precision. Earth's task force, leading the assault on the primary shipyard, unleashed a barrage of energy weapons and kinetic projectiles that tore through the shipyard's defenses in seconds. Explosions rippled through the facility as reactors were hit, causing chain reactions that obliterated entire sections of the shipyard. The fleets still in dock, massive warships that had been intended to reinforce the Empire's armada, were reduced to twisted metal and debris before they could even power up their engines. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as the coalition's forces struck their designated targets. Energy hubs erupted in fireballs that could be seen from neighboring star systems. Communication relays were severed, plunging entire sectors into silence and confusion. Command centers, thought to be impregnable, were infiltrated and neutralized before they could coordinate a response. The empires, caught completely off guard, were unable to react in time. What was supposed to be a routine day turned into a nightmare as their most vital assets were obliterated in a matter of minutes. Panic spread like wildfire through the ranks of the empires. Their leaders, who had spent centuries unchallenged, were stunned by the scale and effectiveness of the attacks. How could these species, once deemed weak and insignificant, have mounted such a coordinated and devastating assault? The Empire's confidence, built on centuries of unchallenged rule, began to crumble. They had believed themselves invincible, but the coalition had just demonstrated that their power was far from absolute. In the aftermath of the strikes, Earth broadcast a message across the galaxy. It was a declaration, simple and direct, aimed not just at the empires but at every species watching from the sidelines. The message made it clear that Earth and its allies would not negotiate with tyrants. The empire's days of unchecked power were over, and those who had suffered under their rule would no longer live in fear. The broadcast was carried on every frequency, reaching even the most remote corners of the galaxy. It was a statement of intent, a promise that the coalition would not stop until the empires were brought to their knees. The empires, now fully aware of the threat they faced, scrambled to regroup. Their military leaders hastily convened to assess the damage and plan a response. But the attacks had struck at the heart of their power, leaving them disoriented and vulnerable. They had always believed that no force in the galaxy could challenge them, but now they were confronted with an enemy that had not only defied them but had done so with a level of precision and ruthlessness that they had never anticipated. As the empires began to mount a counteroffensive, the tension across the galaxy escalated. The coalition's initial success had sent shockwaves through the empires, but it also served as a wake-up call. The empires were now fully aware that they were facing a formidable and determined enemy, one that would not back down or be easily defeated. The stage was set for a war that would determine the future of the galaxy, and for the first time in centuries, the empires found themselves on the defensive. The galaxy was plunged into chaos as the conflict between the coalition and the empires escalated into full-scale war. What had begun as a series of strategic strikes quickly transformed into an all-encompassing battle for the future of countless worlds. The empires, once so sure of their dominance, found themselves on the back foot, scrambling to respond to the coalition's relentless assaults. The coalition, driven by a shared determination to overthrow their oppressors, continued to press their advantage, executing carefully planned operations that targeted the empire's remaining strongholds. As the war raged on, several key battles emerged as turning points in the conflict. In the orbit of a resource-rich planet controlled by one of the most powerful empires, a massive fleet engagement took place. The Empire had mobilized its full might, determined to crush the coalition forces in a single decisive blow. But Earth's commanders, renowned for their tactical brilliance, had anticipated this move. They lured the Empire's fleet into a trap, using advanced cloaking technology and decoy ships to create confusion. When the time was right, the coalition fleet struck with pinpoint accuracy, decimating the Empire's forces and capturing the planet with minimal losses. Another critical battle unfolded in a dense asteroid field, where the coalition's smaller, more agile ships took full advantage of the terrain. The Empire's larger warships, designed for open space combat, struggled to navigate the hazardous environment. The coalition forces, however, used the asteroids as cover, launching hit-and-run attacks that left the Empire's ships vulnerable and isolated. By the time the battle was over, the Empire's fleet had been shattered, and the coalition had secured a vital strategic position. Throughout these battles, the role of human ingenuity and resilience became increasingly evident. Earth's forces, though not the largest or most technologically advanced, consistently outmaneuvered and outthought their opponents. Human engineers developed innovative weapons and defensive systems that caught the empires off guard, while Earth soldiers demonstrated an unbreakable resolve that inspired their allies and struck fear into their enemies. The coalition's members, who had once viewed Earth with skepticism, now saw humanity as a beacon of hope, a force that could lead them to victory. As the war dragged on, the first major empire to fall was a sobering moment for the Galactic Council. This empire had been one of the oldest and most powerful, its rulers confident that they could withstand any challenge. But the coalition's relentless pressure, combined with internal dissent among the empire's subjugated populations, proved too much to bear. The empire's defenses crumbled, its territories were overrun, and its leadership was captured. The fall of this empire marked a significant turning point in the war, sending shockwaves through the remaining empires and emboldening the coalition's forces. The coalition celebrated this victory, recognizing it as a crucial step toward their ultimate goal. But they also knew that the fight was far from over. The remaining empires, though weakened, were still formidable opponents, and they would not go down without a fight. As the coalition prepared for the next phase of the war, they remained vigilant, aware that the most dangerous battles were still ahead. desperation began to take hold among the remaining empires. Their attempts to regroup and launch counteroffensives were met with limited success, as the coalition continued to outmaneuver them at every turn. The empires, once so confident in their superiority, were now forced to confront the reality that they could not win through conventional means. Their strategies became increasingly erratic, driven by fear rather than logic, and their leaders began to contemplate actions that they would have previously considered unthinkable. In the midst of this growing desperation, the coalition remained focused and determined. They had come too far to falter now, and they knew that the Empire's erratic behavior was a sign that their enemies were on the verge of collapse. The coalition's leaders urged their forces to stay the course, reminding them that victory was within reach, but that it would require continued discipline and unity. As the war approached its climax, the galaxy stood on the brink of a new era. The empires, once so invincible, were now shadows of their former selves, their power eroded by the relentless onslaught of the coalition. The coalition, forged in the fires of conflict, had become a formidable force for change, united by a shared vision of a galaxy free from tyranny. The final battles were yet to be fought, but the outcome was becoming increasingly clear. The days of the empires were numbered, and a new order was about to emerge from the ashes of the old. The war had reached its final, most harrowing chapter. The remaining empires, now cornered and desperate, gathered their remaining forces for one last stand. This would be the battle that decided the fate of the galaxy, and both sides knew it. The empires, their backs against the wall, threw everything they had into the fight, every warship, every soldier, every weapon in their arsenal. They had nothing left to lose, and their desperation made them dangerous. The coalition, too, was prepared for the intensity of the coming battle. They had fought hard to reach this point, and they would not falter now. As the battle unfolded, it became clear that this would be the most brutal and intense conflict the galaxy had ever seen. The skies were filled with the fury of combat, as ships clashed in a chaotic dance of destruction. Explosions lit up the darkness of space, while ground forces engaged in fierce skirmishes across multiple worlds. The empires fought with a ferocity born of desperation, determined to take as many of their enemies with them as possible. But the coalition, hardened by years of conflict and driven by a shared purpose, held their ground. Every blow the empires struck was met with equal force, and the coalition's resolve never wavered. Earth's forces played a crucial role in this final confrontation. They had earned a reputation as formidable warriors and brilliant strategists, and they lived up to that reputation in the heat of battle. Earth's fleet spearheaded the assault on the last of the Empire's strongholds, a massive fortress world that had been the seat of power for one of the most brutal regimes. The Empire had concentrated its remaining forces here, hoping to make a final stand that would turn the tide of the war. But Earth's commanders had anticipated this move and devised a plan that would exploit the Empire's weaknesses. The battle for the fortress world was fierce, with both sides sustaining heavy losses. But Earth's forces, bolstered by their allies, pressed on with relentless determination. They targeted the Empire's key defensive positions, systematically dismantling their ability to resist. Advanced Earth technology, coupled with the ingenuity of their allies, proved decisive. The coalition's forces breached the fortress's defenses, and Earth's troops led the charge into the heart of the Empire's command center. The Empire's leaders, once so confident in their invincibility, were captured or killed, and the stronghold fell. With the fall of this last bastion, the remaining empires crumbled. Their forces, demoralized and leaderless, began to surrender en masse. The Galactic Council, which had once ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, was no more. The final empire, seeing the writing on the wall, offered its unconditional surrender, marking the end of an era. Earth's message had been clear from the start. There would be no negotiation with tyrants, no compromise with oppression. The empires had been given a chance to change, and they had refused. Now, they faced the consequences of their hubris. As the dust settled, the coalition began the monumental task of rebuilding the galaxy. The war had left many worlds scarred and devastated, and there was much work to be done. Earth emerged as a leader in this new order, not as a conqueror, but as a guide. The coalition, under Earth's leadership, focused on restoring peace, justice, and cooperation across the galaxy. Formerly oppressed species were given a voice in the new government, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. The coalition worked to dismantle the remnants of the old regimes, replacing them with systems that prioritized freedom and equality. The process of rebuilding was not without challenges. There were deep wounds to heal, and the scars of war would take time to fade. But the coalition, united by their shared experiences and the leadership of Earth, pressed forward. They knew that the future of the galaxy depended on their ability to work together and to learn from the mistakes that had led to the rise of the empires in the first place. As new governments were established and old grievances addressed, a sense of hope began to take root. The galaxy, once divided and ruled by fear, was now moving toward a future defined by cooperation and mutual respect. In this new era, Earth was respected not just for its military prowess, but for its commitment to the principles of justice and freedom. The coalition had proven that even the most powerful forces could be overcome when people stood together for a common cause. Earth's role in the war had been crucial, but it was their vision for the future that truly set them apart. They had fought not for conquest, but for the right of all species to live without fear, to determine their own destinies. As the galaxy entered this new chapter, the former oppressed species now stood as equals, no longer subject to the whims of tyrants. The coalition, once a ragtag alliance of the desperate and the downtrodden, had become the foundation of a new order, one that valued cooperation over domination, freedom over control. Earth, as a leader in this new era, continued to guide the coalition with wisdom and fairness, ensuring that the sacrifices made during the war were not in vain.